It's summer in the icy waters of the South Atlantic, and the penguins are porpoising home to breed. In the next few days, literally millions of these fat little Fred-Astaire's will scramble ashore. This is Jason Robards inviting you to a chilly but bracing penguin summer. It's September when the first parties come battling through the breakers. That's summertime below the equator. The well-fed penguins are encased in thick blubber, which is a good thing since they must withstand waves that would smash a human being to pieces within minutes. And here's what all these little dandies have been battling to reach. This vast breeding colony, stretching 6 miles long. It contains over 3 million birds, almost all of them penguins. The rest of the population, less than 10% overall, is composed of black-browed albatrosses and a few thousand rock and king shags. All this homecoming activity takes place on a handful of desolate islands called the Falklands, off the coast of Argentina. These barren, treeless specks, one of the last outposts of the British Empire, are ideally suited to the penguins, who in fact spend most of the year at sea, 100 miles from land. They only come ashore to breed, and the remoteness of the Falklands suits them perfectly. The Falkland Islands lie at almost the center of penguin territory, some 300 miles off the coast of South America in the South Atlantic. They're only 400 miles northeast of Cape Horn. Not surprisingly, several species are found there. Among them are the kings, Magellans, erect-crested, gentoos, and rockhoppers. The gentoos and rockhoppers are by far the most numerous and are the stars of our story. You've guessed it, these are rockhoppers coming ashore on Steeple Jason Island, one of the smaller Falklands. Rockhoppers are among the smallest species, barely over a foot tall, but they have a giant temper to make up for their size. They are among the noisiest and most quarrelsome of all penguins. Where they get their name is obvious. They are expert hoppers of rocks. They porpoise toward the landing ledges, sometimes leaping 4 feet in the air, hoping to land on their feet, but often flopping on their bellies. Super slow motion shows how little belly flopping worries them. The rockhoppers' climbing ability stands them in good stead when it comes to reaching their nesting grounds, which are high up on the cliffs at the top of the island. Their annual trek to the high ground can look like a parade of pilgrims on their way to a shrine. The rockhoppers' strong sense of territory makes them particularly noisy and intolerant of neighbors as the nesting season begins. They are a particularly stylish species. The elegant gold crest gives them a distinctive panache, almost as if a plain tuxedo wasn't enough. Other seabirds often find a place in the rockhopper's nesting colony. Shags share the same black and white coloration, as well as the rockhopper's territory. The shag's courtship is more subtle and far quieter than the penguin's. But perhaps the most gentle and romantic of all are the black-browed albatrosses. Their courtship has an almost tender quality about it. Down at sea level, the Gen 2 penguins make their landfall at much the same time. They are about twice the size of the rockhoppers, and their lifestyle is quite different. For one thing, they prefer to land on the sand rather than the rocks, and for another, they waddle rather than hop. Their nesting sites are lower down, closer to the water. The distinguishing mark of the Gen 2 is that white headscarf. Gen 2s are what you might call the basic penguin. You've seen their pictures on packs of mentholated cigarettes. Like rockhoppers, they nest in much the same site year after year. The long march to the colony is always orderly, determined, and unhurried. Within 10 days of the first party's landing, the colony is full. Nest building with penguins is largely a ritual affair. In the Gen 2's case, it's hardly more than balancing a few stones. Still, it requires immense concentration. The love song of the Gen 2, or any other kind of penguin for that matter, is something less than music. The nest builder finally succeeded. As with rockhoppers, the preliminaries of mating and setting up house are noisy and cantankerous. Pairs form and break up, often to reform. If both have survived the winter at sea, previous year's partnerships are sometimes renewed. At last, the females settle down to brood their eggs. Now, where did I lay that egg? Ah, there we are. Further up the hills in the rockhopper and albatross colony, courtship and nesting is getting into full swing too. With the short-tempered rockhoppers, this includes a lot of arguing. Rockhoppers lay 2 eggs, and they're big ones. They have to be big because the breeding season is short. The eggs must contain enough nourishment to get the chick growing and out of the nest fast. And big eggs take an awful lot of laying. The second egg will be even more of an effort. It's usually slightly larger. As soon as the second egg is laid, the female starts incubating, but only for a few hours. Then the male takes over. Another special adaptation of the penguin. It can drink seawater because special head glands help disperse the salt. Still and all, fresh water is always welcome, and frequent rainstorms produce plenty. Rockhoppers don't lay 3 eggs, but some female has mistakenly laid that extra egg in the wrong nest. The householder guards it jealously from an intruder, possibly the real mother. Penguins have no land predators. This could be one of the reasons why they've lost the normal use of their wings. They've no need to escape by flying. But at nesting times, their eggs and young are constantly under attack from the air, mainly by skuas, who lurk at the edge of the colony, always on the alert for an unguarded nest. Here's one egg that will never hatch. As often as not, the skuas prey upon each other as well. There's no honor among thieves. Most nesting colonies face 2 main dangers. First, attack by bird predators. Second, really bad weather. A fog bank, like this one rolling in from the Southern Ocean, can bring with it a bitterly cold storm from deep inside the Antarctic Circle. But adult penguins are proof against the worst the Falklands can throw at them. The Falklands rarely see heavy snow. When it comes, in this case mixed with hail, the penguins probably enjoy it. With their heat-retaining bodies, their main problem is how to keep cool. The snow rarely lingers for long. The wet winds normally get rid of it in a day or two and leave the countryside green again. With the weather clear, the rockhoppers start on the long journey down from the cliff-top nesting colony to go fishing in the sea. As with everything else in penguin life, they do it in groups. At first, the well-worn path leads down between the hummocks of tussock grass. Once the tussock has been negotiated, the rock hopping starts. The sharp nails in the toes helps them to cling to the rocks. Many take the long round trip every day. Each jump takes them about 1 foot forward. At the steepest points along the trail, the rocks bear the scars of maybe thousands of years of penguins' progress. Some points along the way definitely need slippery when wet signs. The trail has been blazed by countless generations of rock hoppers. Long tradition has also established the best points from which to launch oneself into the sea. The trick is to judge when the wave reaches its highest point. Not that it matters very much if you get it all wrong. You can't help feeling that for the rock hoppers, it's all something of a game. Not far away, the Gen 2s are coming ashore from fishing expeditions to take their turn at the nest. They torpedo toward the beach underwater and explode from the surf and tumble ashore. Once on their feet beyond the reach of their enemies, they are calm and fearless. The first party begins this long walk to the colony while more and more come porpoising in behind. Porpoising not only enables the penguins to breathe, it probably confuses the predatory seals. As in a school of fish, there's safety in numbers. The touching thing about penguins is how completely trusting they are once they're ashore. They trust human beings because since the early 19th century, when sealers occasionally raided the Falklands for skins and penguin oil, wildlife has had little to fear from man. Luckily for penguins, they don't taste good and have little or no commercial value. If man represents a threat at all, it's from fleets of fishing boats cruising offshore and cutting into the penguins' food supply. For the rock hoppers, low tide produces some landing problems. It exposes thick beds of tangled seaweed called giant kelp. So the rock hoppers suddenly find themselves in a kind of seaweed maze where hopping doesn't get you anywhere. Clever ones wait for a big wave to bring them within range of a sloping rock ledge. Rockhoppers returning from the sea often do a very peculiar thing that no one has so far explained. Having been in seawater for a number of days, they immediately take a swim in a quiet tidal pool. It's possible that they just enjoy a tranquil dip after being buffeted about in the surf. Meanwhile, it gives us a chance to admire their swimming techniques. They're actually flying through the water. After the bath, they take a brief rest on the flat shelves around the landing area, particularly on a sunny day. Then once again, they have to face that long climb up to the top of the cliff. Some colonies are as much as 500 feet above the sea. The photographic team filming at the nesting site found they were completely accepted by the residents, including the nesting shags. Up here on dry land, the birds had no fear of predators. But down below in the sea, the bird's natural habitat, it is a completely different story. In the Falklands, sea lions are the adult penguin's only predators. The gentoos seem particularly vulnerable when landing or setting off to sea. There's a sea lion now. The gentoos simply have to go to sea to feed themselves, so they move further up the beach. And the sea lion watches, knowing that sooner or later they'll just have to make a dash for it. The target is usually a penguin returning to shore, perhaps because it's tired and therefore slower. But another mass of returning gentoos distracts the hunter, and this victim escapes. The U-boat turns to lie in wait for an easier target. The sea lion doesn't have to wait long. The incredible thing is that the sea lions very seldom eat their catch. It seems to be a lethal kind of play. The only winners are the giant petrels who hang around whenever they spot a sea lion hunting. The oil slick, amazingly, is the product of one dismembered penguin. Slow motion captures the gentoo's frantic efforts to escape and the deadly interaction between victims and killers. The winds that give the seas around Cape Horn their deservedly awful reputation are no strangers to the Falklands. When they strike, they give little warning. So what does a penguin do in a force 10 gale? The answer is, he carries on as if nothing has happened. The identical spot only 24 hours later. As suddenly as the winds come, they vanish. The penguins take it all in their rock-hopping stride. The time is fast approaching when the first chicks will hatch out. At that moment, it's usually the males who are brooding the eggs. So these sleek, well-fed penguins, returning with full bellies from the sea, are most likely to be females. As soon as the rockhopper chicks dry after hatching, the parents feed them on regurgitated seafood. The camera team is there to record the action. In one part of the colony, the black-browed albatrosses easily outnumber the rockhoppers. The albatrosses were equally relaxed about being filmed. They start to nest before the penguins, and their young develop more slowly. Their fledglings will still be there when the young penguins have left for the sea. In their cone-shaped mud nests, the albatrosses have a less exacting task than the rockhopper parents. They only lay one egg. Their single chick is less vocal and demanding than the young penguins. On the outskirts of the nesting colony, the predators now have young to feed too. Under this rocky overhang, a striated caracara, or Johnny Rook, is nesting. Prey, and plenty of it, is what a caracara needs to feed its own family. Young penguins fill the bill very nicely. One caracara chick is very much bigger than its sibling. Watch how it gets all the food. That's often the way with birds of prey. The smaller bird probably won't survive. Those relentless and successful nest robbers, the skuas, have new families too. And penguin chicks are definitely on the menu. The skua young leave the nest shortly after hatching. The parents hide them among the rocks until they're ready to feed them. Watch how this chick is made to work for its meal. Skuas will scavenge any dead birds they find in the colony. And they'll also kill any young penguin rash enough to wander away from the protection of its parents. This one never had a chance. These skua young have spotted their parents' kill. One advances confidently, while the other, who may have hatched a day or two later, hides uncertainly. The timid chick still begs to be fed. The more advanced one digs in like the true predator it is already growing up to be. Everyone's chicks are growing fast now. Throughout the whole huge mixed colony, young of all ages must be continuously fed. King shag, black-browed albatross, rockhopper penguin. They're all cramming seafood into their young. In this nest, the situation is rapidly getting out of control, with the chick as big as its parent. Whatever the size of their offspring, penguin parents are remarkably conscientious, giving them warmth and protection whether they want it or not. As the chicks develop a sense of balance, they creep out from under their parents and stand beside them. They're so full of food, they look like little beach balls. The next stage is for the rockhopper young to form up in groups of the same age, and the parents now go off to fish, leaving them on their own. The young seem to be able to find enough protection from skuas just by huddling together. For the first few days, they'll return to their nesting area to be fed. Further down the island, on the open ground of the Gentoo colony, the system is a little different. When the parents return from the sea, the young birds have to chase them before they get fed. It's a kind of training for the time soon to come when they'll have to pursue their own food in the ocean. Feeding chases are an important stage in their education. Still, to human eyes, it all looks like something out of an old Marx Brothers movie. King shags make their young work for their food too, though in a slightly different way. Their chicks must pester their parents with their beaks before they get fed. Some young shags don't appear to know the difference between a full crop and a loaded camera. The last stage of the young penguin's development before heading out to sea is to shed all their baby fluff. Penguins have more feathers than any other bird. That's another cold climate adaptation. And when they're all being shed at once, the result is like a snowstorm. Even those flipper-like wings are covered with feathers, though they look more like small scales. At this stage, they're fed by their parents much less frequently. They're beginning to resemble the adults. The golden eyebrows are developing nicely, but they won't come to their full glory for at least a year. This one is obviously a late developer. Now, when cinematographer Cindy Buxton walked through the colony, the young penguins were slightly apprehensive, but even so, they give no sign of panic. And here is the finished product, sleek and ready to start out for its real home, the sea. The young are fed less and less now, so that the incentive of hunger is there to persuade them seawards. The thick coating of feathers floating in the pool gives an idea of the mess the molting fledglings are making of the nesting colony. The young venture further and further each day, instinctively using the paths trodden by every rockhopper for centuries before them. An adult is leading this party. Parents still look for their own young along the trail to feed them, but now they provide only a bare minimum of food. At this time, the adults need a lot of nourishment themselves. Once their young have finally gone to sea, they'll molt their own feathers. It's the first chance they've had to do so. Molting means that they'll no longer be waterproof and able to fish. So once they've got rid of their families, they face a 2 or 3 week fast. Down on the flat ledges close to the sea, a good deal of argument still goes on as parents seek out their own children and chase away strangers. Newly fledged shags look surprised to find themselves in such a quarrelsome gathering. Now it's a question of plucking up courage to take the first plunge. Some of the shags have already made it. One brave young rockhopper leads the way, and away they go. On the clifftop, the rockhopper colony is now empty. The only occupants are the photographers and the slow-to-mature black-browed albatross young. This one's just going through the motions of flying. It's still too young for the real thing. What swimming is to penguins, soaring is to an albatross. Both are masters of their respective arts. It's just that an albatross needs longer to acquire the skills necessary to travel the stormy Southern Ocean. Parents still feed the fully fledged young, even while they're taking their final flying lessons without actually leaving the ground. One dusk or early morning, they'll follow their parents out to sea and become masters of the wind, and then the clifftop colony will finally be deserted. Meanwhile, down at the shore, the last young rockhoppers to molt make their way to the sea's edge. The young of this season won't disappear from sight of land immediately. They'll stay close to the shore for a while, gaining confidence in the surf, learning all the skills of diving and swimming, and most important, how to catch krill, squid, and small fish. You can almost share the joy that a young penguin feels on first contact with the ocean. Next year, they may come back to the area where they were hatched, but they won't be ready to breed until they're at least 3. One or two bold ones may climb the rocky path and approach the colony out of curiosity, but they won't dare to enter. They're certain to be attacked and driven off by the adults. So mostly they'll just hang around, sunbathing and swimming. Penguins live a long time, 25 or 30 years maybe, so if they survive the perils of the sea, they can afford to wait a while before they start raising their own young. We've talked about threats to future generations of Falklands penguins. Well, what are they? Here's one, and a familiar one at that. An oiled penguin. There's a strong chance that oil will be found between the Falklands and South America. If so, then oil spills present a real threat to the penguins. But there's an even more clear and present danger. There is still only a 3-mile fishing limit around the Falklands. Outside this, trawlers are already sweeping up the abundant fish. What effect will this have on the penguin population? Only time will tell. Meanwhile, a group of Falkland penguins looking like Scott Fitzgerald characters at a Palm Beach cocktail party survey the setting sun. Happily, the threats to them and their way of life all lie in the future. For the present, their situation is close to ideal. And while environmental threats have a nasty way of moving overnight into the present, there's every reason to expect that these marvelous birds will continue to hop the rocks of the Falkland Islands for hundreds of years yet to come. This is Jason Robards. Good night.